So, welcome back. Thanks for not going home to enjoy the rest of the evening, for staying for the second talk. So please welcome back again, Ivor Commins.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, so it was good that we went through all the kind of positive stuff, because it is positive and what we need to be doing. This one is more about mental strength and psychology. It's something I've been into for decades. And in the last 6 months, or actually 8 or 9 months, I've done 50-hour courses because I wanted to take all my knowledge in psychology after decades of managing teams and working on my own mental strength, kind of informally. I wanted to go through the process of doing all the academic, scientific stuff. I didn't find out too much more, but I just felt more comfortable before I gave classes on it to have done so. So I run ivorcomminsworkshops.com. It's a kind of a prototype for me. I do live interactive workshops on the key topics of mental strength and critical thinking. It's kind of important. And weight loss I do because I've been helping people with that for a long time, and I'm going to add more. I did invest in a large touch screen because I saw one of the psychology lecturers use one. I thought it was cool. And you can actually write on the screen as people in your workshop through Zoom tell you their anxieties or stuff, and you work through them with templates. So I invested quite a bit. So it's a bit of a lost leader running it. But I hope to put pre-recorded ones with all the materials and templates up for purchase at a lower price for people who don't really particularly need to go to a live one. Now, you all heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Very important. I was arrogant enough to create my own triangle. Why should Maslow have a triangle, not me? And it's a bit different because it's all around solutions as opposed to just understanding how people are. And I would call it integration of the mind. Now, these things I'd have to explain, but briefly, thought scanning and analysis for me is fundamental. It's the most basic thing we should all be doing. We have around 50,000 thoughts a day. 95% of them are the exact same as the ones we had yesterday. So we're kind of trapped by our past. I know it's weird. And you think, how could you have 50,000? But they're all flying through your subconscious. Like the brain, the machine, all the time is thoughts they're flying around. We recognize some of them and we realize we're thinking about something, but there's tens of thousands more. And because they're the same as yesterday for most people, we're kind of trapped in the current because we're having the same thoughts every day. So a lot of those thoughts 80% are generally negative. They're kind of fear-based or concern-based thoughts because survival's important. So we have around 40,000 negative thoughts flying through our head each day. And unless you can kind of begin to become expert in pulling them out and analyzing them, they'll cause you mild depression, mood drop, anxiety, perspiring, overthinking, yada, yada, yada. So thought scanning. Belief re-encoding is important because we encoded a lot of beliefs in ourselves when we were younger that were not actually true. But they're in there now in the database, and they can affect how we react and how we perform now, even though now if we reassess them and understood them, we could rewrite them correctly. So that's a thing, and there's tools for that. Values and purposes we mentioned, luckily, about the martyrs. Values and purposes gave me the strength to get put in the New York Times in hit pieces, and Belfast Telegraph put a half page on me and accused me kind of for the death of a Northern Ireland councillor in his 40s, family man. I'm telling you, it was nuts. People used to write to me when they saw these hit pieces, Ivor, are you okay? Luckily, as I said, I'm fine. But it was because I knew exactly what I was doing and why, and I viewed them all as pond scum. So I wasn't affected by all the abuse so much. Prefrontal dominant, we'll explain in a minute, and measuring only against the best that you can be is what you can achieve if you do all of this very well, and you fully internalize. If anyone criticizes you, many of us, it throws us into a spin. Or certainly if a big newspaper publishes a hit piece, most people would go to ground. I didn't care. If people criticize you, by all means, take what they say, analyze it without emotion, and if they've made a valid point where you could be better, then go and be better. But don't ever let anyone judge you and have you take it to heart. It makes no sense. But let's be honest, most people, it really hurts them, you know? So that's it. If you get The Chimp Paradox by Professor Steve Peters, quite a beautiful gentleman, incredible mind, a lovely man, and he cracked 15 years ago how our brains work and how you can, by understanding that, become much stronger and manage your mind much better. It's around $5 or $6. He probably gets 50 cents out of it because I'm an author and I know what you get. He's doing this for wanting to help people. But yeah, buy his book, read it. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to speed things up. Basically, we have two thinking machines in our head. One of them is essentially a chimpanzee structure, same as a chimp's brain. I know, that's how we got here, or the creator decided to do this, or evolution, whatever you want. But we have a human brain that is separate. Two thinking machines, two conductors of the orchestra, and you need to manage them. You need to manage them. So roughly speaking, hypothalamus gives us our drives, like shelter, water, food. It's programmed into us. It's instinctual. The amygdala, you might have heard of, that's the emotional memory center. Simplifying it, people think, oh, your amygdala makes you, have a fit. But it's actually much more interesting than that, because the orbitofrontal cortex is actually our chimp brain. And it is unto itself a thinking machine. And it runs our life from birth. We're born with our chimp brain, we inherit it as it is, right? And that's why babies up to 2 or 3 years old, they're very emotional, they're impulsive, they screech, they can't see logic, they can't problem solve, because they've only got their chimp brain. And then your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex develops. So from 3 or 4 onwards, you begin to become you. So you are your prefrontal cortex. That is you. You are not your chimp. You're responsible for managing your chimp, but you are this, right? And by all means, the dorsolateral links with the amygdala, but the chimp brain really owns that space. The dorsolateral mainly links to hippocampal, and your dorsolateral is you, the human, and it has a sense of time. The chimp has no sense of time. It has logic, can read and write logical structures. The chimp has none. It can feel compassion in a very advanced way. The chimp can't. And I could go on, but this is the human brain. This is what makes us human. This is why we rule the planet, or wherever you want to say. The thalamus gets signals from the outside world. Well, thalami, there's 2 of them, little walnuts. And they give the signals of everything that happens in the outside world, events. Someone shouts at you, a car cuts across you. The chimp brain is given that first to take action. Sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? You'd think it'd be given to you, right? Because you're smarter. No, the chimp is fight, flight, freeze, survival. So the chimp will always get first dibs in anything that happens. And you can probably see this is the problem, because the chimp can make a lot of mistakes, especially in the modern world, right? We're not in the jungle anymore. And then the human brain gets to step in. But luckily, there are ways of managing the chimp brain's response, but they require knowledge and they require tools, and most people just don't have a clue what's happening. When they have a road rage incident and the chimp goes crazy, and after it, maybe they've hit someone, and now they're in a jail cell, and they're sitting there thinking, what was I thinking? What did I do? But they have no idea that their chimp brain did all that. It felt its local environment was being infringed upon. It felt threatened by the incident with the other driver, and it went off on a warpath, So the chimp brain is very challenging. The rest is very complex. Peters goes through, but the rest of the brain, really, all the blue, he calls the computer, just to separate the thinking machines that conduct the orchestra from the massively complex system of the brain, Your role is, as a human, is to program your computer over time to make your whole mental strength better. So here's what happens. An activating event, difficult interaction, fight with your spouse, boss shouts at you or says your work is crap, road rage, an animal comes into the room when you're watching television, or you see something moving, anything, right? First thing that happens is goes to the thalami, which are like kind of transponders or relay stations, and it sends the information to the chimp so the chimp can decide, is it a problem? The first step that happens after that is the chimp stops the human brain from engaging. It blocks it, right? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But it made sense for thousands, millions of years. You can't trust a human thinking brain with what might be an immediate fight, flight, or freeze threat. You just can't trust it.
Is this when you get expressed in a rush of blood to the head?
Rush of blood to the head, yes. And that's remarkably accurate because...
Football, I used to.
Yeah. Well, the rush of blood to the head, actually, it's really interesting because Professor Peters thought up this model without proof. And 10 years after he wrote the book, and he had it as a framework for medical students to help them understand how humans work, but he didn't have proof. But 10 years later, papers were published where they verified this. They got people and they caused them to go into anxious states, and the blood flowed to the limbic system. Yeah, the blood literally flows and their MRIs lit up. And then when they got them thinking logically, calmed them down and distracted them, and Peters did this as well with people. He said with patients, he could turn them into two different people. That's how he thought up the model. He realized if he brought them into emotional or areas they felt threatened by, they were different people than when he calmed them and brought them into different questions. He realized he was dealing with two different people. And that's where he made this model. And they've proved since that not only is it correct scientifically, but the brain we have, the thinking machine, is direct copy of chimpanzee, but not any of the other great apes. They're very different. So he even got that right. He even got that right. So after the human is blocked for a moment, the chimp checks with the computer. It actually respects the computer, which holds all the knowledge of the chimp and the human brain over the whole life. And it respects if the computer tells it it's okay or whatever. And rightly so. Now, what can happen is if it was, say, an animal moved in the corner of the room and you're watching television, what can happen really fast is that's a potential threat, goes to the chimp brain checks the computer verifies that actually that's the new puppy because it has all the pattern recognition and memory. And it's able to answer, no, that's the puppy. And then you may do an autopilot. You may absent-mindedly go over and pet it, you know, because the computer basically said, we got this. The computer alternatively can feed back and say, no, there is a concern, or this is not fully answered. But it can tell the chimp, this is a problem from our memory, from all our knowledge. This is a problem. It could be pretty bad. And the chimp could choose to basically do fight, flight, freeze, hence the rush of blood to the head. Or the computer could come back and say, actually, this is more appropriate for the human to take care of. It's complicated, it needs work, but it's not for extreme reaction. And it gets finally handed to the computer brain. That's happening all the time with every impulse. It's good, isn't it? The beauty is, and the reason I put it in gold, and this is a symbol for psychology, this is psychological gold. All right, yeah. No, apparently I found the symbol for psychology and then I changed it in PowerPoint to be golden, just because I thought it was a bit funny. Anyway, the gold is, as Professor Peters says, it's very hard to arm wrestle the chimp because primordially it's much more powerful than us. It's not impossible, but in the moment when you do get control, it's very hard to fight with your chimp. The route to fix this problem is to reprogram your computer over time because the chimp will absolutely trust the computer. Do you see the trick? Circumvent the problem. How do you program the computer? Well, I tell you how you don't, unfortunately, positive thinking. I'm not against positive thinking, I'm a very positive thinking guy. However, if you are very nervous speaking and you keep telling yourself tomorrow morning at that speech, I'm going to be fine and this is it, I'm just going to do it, right? The problem with that is your own brain knows that you're not authentic and your own brain knows it's not true. So it does not write to the computer because it's not true. So positive thinking at a basic level doesn't work because your brain knows you're just saying it, okay? However, if you use templates and analyze an anxiety you have and lay out all the facts and the justification for that anxiety, and maybe get a very good friend to honestly tell you about that problem, and you think and you contemplate it, and you come to the conclusion that actually, you know what, I understand now that I will be better tomorrow at that speech, and you believe it. If you do that work over time and meditate or internalize it, the system will recognize that the human brain now has a new perspective, and it's authentic, and it will write to the computer, and it will better control that guy when you get up on the podium. Okay, this applies to everything. This applies to everything. Now, public speaking is a good example because a lot of people are nervous at it. So that's the magic step, and that takes practice and work. I've been doing this for around 25 years plus, and it's the only reason I'm here today. It's the only reason they can print articles attacking me, embarrass my whole family, have friends cancel me, and I don't care. It's largely because of this, but it took many, many, many years. So fundamentally, cognitive behavioral science, which is what this is based on. Now, the chimp model is fantastic, but it's largely CBT. Events that happen in the world and a huge amount of how they affect us is based on our own personal history and our beliefs that are encoded in our amygdala and in our hippocampal. So events that happen don't affect one person, they're not worried, and you're a shivering wreck. Obviously, we each have our own memories and fears that when events happen, they trigger us. But all these events, they're usually, when they cause a problem, your chimp brain has felt a threat and got involved. And that's why you can't just stoically deal with the challenge, because that's your human brain. But the chimp often causes trouble. And the root cause for most people is, well, they say, if I get healthy feelings or good feelings, or I get bad feelings or depression, or I begin to perspire, it's because of what happened. They shouted at me. That's why I'm sweating and anxious and I'm miserable the last 2 days, because that's not true. Now, I know you'll say, hold on a minute. No, but that's not true. Or they'll say, well, the fact that they hit that person was because of this. And that's not true, right? The root cause of behaviors and emotions and feelings is the thoughts that are conducted based on the events. And that's why the Stoics said all the time in a million different quotes, Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus or Cicero, they all said the same thing in many ways. The quality of your life depends entirely on the quality of your thoughts. And they understood thousands of years ago, before any science, all of what I'm telling you, just from thinking about it, they worked it out. They realized that everything is the thoughts, ephemeral thoughts that occur in your head are creating all the outcomes. And it's not really what happens. It's your thoughts. And unfortunately, our thoughts are chaotically, oftentimes controlled by the chimp brain. So the 50,000 thoughts, there's a thing called NATs, negative automatic thoughts. They can happen and repeat all day long and you're miserable. That's the chimp is anxious. And the chimp cannot speak to you in any language but emotion. So when the chimp is anxious, your stomach has a knot in it, because the chimp can only speak to you in there in emotion. I am scared, I am anxious, I am frightened. This happened to me when I was 8 years old, right? Now what's happening is like that, but the chimp has no sense of time. So the chimp now, right, today, the 29th of June, something happens that triggers a memory from when you were 8. To the chimp is 8. That memory is now. It is living that fear or trauma that happened. The human brain would know that, well, actually, that was then. But remember, it's the chimp brain that is sending the emotional torrent. It's got control, you know? So managing our chimp and managing our thoughts is where the magic is. And that takes some skill. So I'm just taking one of many slides like this just to give a flavor. So your current state, let's say your computer is quite red. It's not good. We won't name anyone, but there are lots of people. Half the people in the world, I'd say, their computer is red by my standard. Half the people in the world, so a few billion. Rough and tough. But if someone has any self-esteem or any past memories that are impacting their current functionality, they got stuff going on. And if you allowed the chimp to manage your life, or you can't control it or don't understand it, your feelings will tend to be like this over time, over weeks and months. That will be your life. It's not a great way to live. And take an extreme example. Someone who clearly has severe anxiety, right? The amplitude of that is going to be even bigger. It's not a nice way to live. Okay. If you have faith, religious faith, that's kind of better, right? Because your religious faith is giving you strength. And I did mention values and principles give you great power. But broadly, someone who has a faith and they use that to stay level, it's better in many ways. But when you lose your faith and something goes badly wrong, that type of person, you can get a real slide down, and then you can recover your faith and get over and you're back up again. So that's the kind, engineering wise, that's kind of your life. Occasional big drops. Ideal state, self-concept is what I'm talking about. And I'm still striving for a lot of progress over 30 years, but I'm still striving, still working. And that's when you base your thoughts and your life on facts in a structured way. You always put facts down on paper, evidence for and against the thoughts that are giving you bad feeling or anxiety. You get the facts down, you analyze them like an engineer, and then you meditate and internalize the picture you have worked on, because the human brain can problem solve. The chimp can't. And then you internalize, actually, I wasn't totally at fault for that thing I did, which is killing me. It's so embarrassed. I'm just all day long the last 3 days I thought about that thing I did. But you find out when you analyze it that you could say, well, maybe I was 30% responsible for that bad thing, and then others were X%. You're quantifying it. And then you begin to accept that you did something wrong and you were 30% responsible, but you internalize and accept that, come to terms with it, and now you are beginning to take away the whole anxiety around that thing because you've done the work. You've written it down, you've analyzed it, you've got input, you've actually done the work on paper. There's a reason humans can read and write and chimps can't. We have the capability of doing what I'm describing. And when you do it, you move forward. And if you keep doing it, obviously for the more problematic thoughts, you don't do it for everything, right? If you keep doing it over time, you move towards this. And that is living more as a Stoic. That's it. This is a big one. I go through circle of concern and circle of control in the online workshop. Most people now are like this. They are dominated by their circle of concern. A lot of their mind share is looking at celebrities, looking at problems, worrying about this, worrying about that, blah, blah, blah. And relatively, they're not spending near enough on their friends, their family, their life, and their progression as a human being, being better, being the best that you can be. They're not really spending enough on that. They're distracted. Think of the Telegram groups where people are all going off screaming about chemtrails. It's an example, right? They can't do jack shit about chemtrails. What are they talking about them for? Come on. So that's a lot of people. Here is a Stoic circle of control approach. Now, you do keep an eye on what's happening in the world, like this stuff, because you need to keep an eye on it and keep abreast of what's happening, because that's the smart thing to do in case you need to, take evasive action, or, you're keeping an eye on the politics, things are looking really bad and maybe you're going to move somewhere else. You keep an eye on stuff, or you get a few people you can trust who are experts who work and analyze those things, and you just get the bottom line off them. But most of your time is spent on you, your friends, your family, or in this case, your community. That's valuable, right? You don't spend time on people who canceled you or who would cancel you. There's no point. because they have different value systems, and you just try and help them by converting cleverly. But anyway, that's the point about circle of concern and control. The chimp drives us to be like this, generally speaking. The human mind, if independently allowed to decide, would be more interested in problem solving, planning, strategy, and things like that. That's what humans do. That's how we got through the Ice Age. But the chimp is obsessed with heroes, leaders of the troop. That's why all the people like follow the leader and follow experts, because the chimp, like, that's survival. If you stay in with the leaders in the troop, and if you don't be seen to question, you won't get rejected by the troop. Think chimp world. If the chimp is rejected by the troop or causes trouble, it gets thrown out and it's dead. So at some human level, when your chimp brain is operating, allowed to operate under the radar, it is an existential threat to be cancelled or to be criticized. That's why we feel it so deeply. One psychiatrist once says, after the threat of death or serious injury, the second threat down for humans is being excluded. Just being excluded from their society in some manner. It's the second fear. But he didn't know about the chimp model. It's because the chimp brain has gotten concerned about being excluded, because in chimp world, exclusion is death, right? The jaguar gets you. And when you get more like this, now you're operating prefrontal dominant stoic. Remember the fourth step? You are beginning to use your human brain mostly to decide where you focus, strategize, plan. How can I improve my life, improve my friend's life, improve my community? You're now working on the important stuff while keeping an eye on the bad guys in the background, not getting all worked up, but just being aware. Like today in an hour, you probably got a ton of stuff about what's happening. You don't need to worry about it for the moment now. You're aware, okay? To carry the weight of things beyond our control is to willingly burden ourselves with unnecessary suffering. Again, that's Marcus. He's a master. If I could meet anyone in history for dinner, do you ever hear that question? Hands down, Marcus Aurelius. Maybe Epictetus, but no, I think Marcus Aurelius, right? Loads of quotes along that lines, and everything else in this psychology, they've done quotes in it. They understood it all. So Stoics is amazing. So that's it. Thought scanning, belief re-encoding, value and purpose, and then to get prefrontal dominant. That's where you control your circle of concern, circle of control, and you get up towards this. That is the idea. Now, we don't have time to do it, though maybe we can send a link later to some templates, but essentially there is a lot of tools around this, a series of questions to guide you when you fill out thought scanning or thought detective templates, where you can get the evidence for and against the thought that's causing you concern, properly process it, be honest, get input from friends. Is there an action you can take? You know, humans problem solve, they strategize with a time-based plan, and they take actions to resolve issues. And that's what you need to do. And when you work through that process, you begin to shift up the triangle. You know, not going to happen overnight. Now, I can do all that thought analysis in my head because I've been doing it for decades, but it's very important to know if you're new to it and you've got anxiety-based negative automatic thoughts, the last possible place you can work on them is in the head where they are causing trouble. Just think about that. It's kind of a poem there, Matt. Think about. But anyway, you can't do it in your head until you've been doing it so long that you can manage your internal architecture and pull a piece of your head aside and work on it without the chimp being allowed to intervene. The chimp will give you the dance of the gremlins. See, the people recognize this. You think of a negative thought and you're a bit down because you realize, shit, I fought with my brother. Haven't seen him in 3 days. I don't want to call. I don't want to apologize. And then you kind of think about it and you think, well, you know what? It was mostly his fault. And then I'll call to him at the weekend. You procrastinate. The chimp is massive for procrastination. Massive. Procrastination is mostly that fella. So you say that to yourself, but then suddenly another thought comes in. Another bad thing. Oh, that report is late. And you go, well, I can do that report. And then another bad thought. Do you ever get that? That's the dance of the gremlins. The chimp throws out concerns at you. And when you deal with one or two of them in your head, it throws out another one. Because it's got the message that you're saying, no, I'm not worried about that. And it throws out another one. That's the dance of the gremlins. I love that analogy. So unless you've been doing it a long, long time, and even me, a year ago, I had a big problem going on at home. And I remember getting up at 4:30 and I said, I got to resolve this shit because I knew this was going on. And I got up and a couple of nights I wrote 12 or 14 A4s of scenarios around the challenge because it was quite multifocal. And yeah, I had to do it myself because it was a big and complex problem. There was no easy answers. But when I did that, a couple of hours, around 6:30 a.m., I was feeling tired because obviously I was up really early. But because I'd processed it and because I'm quite good at internalizing it and meditating on it, so it actually is working and I know it's working, I went back to bed and I sleep like a baby. Now maybe a couple of nights later, new things develop and I have to do it again. But you work through it and then that becomes the past. But the power of this is extraordinary. And I don't know what I'd do without it. Like I say, without this over decades, I wouldn't be here. No way I could stand up in COVID. I would have kept my head down. I would have stayed in my corporate, kept my head down, not progressed myself too far because that's stressful. The only way I could do it was this. Limiting beliefs, it's a similar process, a series of ways you explore your past and your beliefs and then challenge them. And again, using a good friend you can trust to give you honest opinions on these things, you work through them. But the funny thing is, no one wants to do the work. Everyone wants mental strength to get rid of their limiting beliefs and to be much stronger and change the world. We all want it. But believe it or not, most people wouldn't even spend a few hours a week to achieve that. They say, well, yeah, and they don't do it. So anyway, that's kind of it. Last one. On communicating with people, this requires huge practice. I've kind of been doing it for decades, and I could do it for decades more, and I'll never fully master it. Perceptual positions. You're going to have a conversation with someone who's hypnotized. It's going to be tense. Could be a spouse, could be your brother. You're going to have to do it really expertly to potentially cleverly convert them or move them forward just the right amount, but don't push them too far or they'll reject you and say conspiracy theorist. So it's tricky, very tricky. Here's one tool around that. It ain't easy. What you have to do is you have to scan what you're saying and thinking, obviously. You have to scan the other person, what they are replying with, and you have to see what they're saying, and you have to be ready with responding to them appropriately. So now you're pretty busy. This is a conversation. You unfortunately have to scan their face for visual cues and emotive cues. So not just listen to them, but watch their face for when emotional pieces come up, and then you can recognize that's a hot button for them. So you should be reading the face for emotional cues, little signs, agitation, and incorporating that into how you're going to respond to them in a moment. So now it's getting pretty busy, right? It's getting pretty busy. It gets busier because if you're really going to do it, you have a notional, respected older, wiser person in the room with you that the other person doesn't know about, but they are watching you and judging you. So everything you say and do, you are conscious that someone you respect hugely, an older, wiser person, is actually watching your performance in this conversation. And believe me, that will change hugely how you conduct it. So if you are tempted to get angry when you're trying to convert someone and say, for God's sake, the vaccine is killing us all, or whatever, I'm telling you, you think of the older, wiser person who's a great negotiator and they're watching you, and you respect them, you're not going to do it. So you can see the power of a notional person that you keep in your mind there. What I've just described to you is quite a lot of shit to have managed in your mind dynamically in an actual conversation. So it ain't easy, but if you keep practicing it and you get good at it, you will be a lot more effective communicator and converter of people, and it's never too late. just to practice this. So I've done a real quick, using humor came up before, and memes enables people to resolve conflicts. So really in that communication as well, be careful with this one. You can use humor, especially if you see little signs of tension or emotional in the person. You can use humor to relax it down a bit. You can make a joke. Usually you'll have to use a self-deprecating joke, right? Because if you just make a joke about what they're saying, they could blow up. I don't need to tell you this, but it is true that humor can be useful in these things. And self-deprecating humor can be particularly useful. So we need to wrap it at that, but I'll send the link on after, maybe to the guys. This interview I thought was the best I ever did in ways. I said it was the most important ever. And you know this guy, Desmond? More people wrote to me saying, thank you, because I just could not deal with my friends and family falling for stuff that is just nonsense. And now I understand how it happens, and it's not really their fault. Thank you. So I got massive replies. I think it's a really good one to watch or rewatch as to why people fall for the nonsense of the bad guys I went through earlier. It is kind of human. And it is their chimp brain. Because these bad boys who do all this stuff, they've got the psychologists, they've got all the money, and Sage was over half psychology, right? Come on. And they know about the chimp. And when they do their stuff, they speak to our chimp brain. Granny's at risk, right? Threat, okay? You need to save this person. Virtue signaling, troop behavior, fitting in with the troop. Look at all the fitting in stuff. So they speak to our chimp brain. And most people, they hijack people's chimps. And after that, then they get entrenched. So I think, that's, look, limited time. I just want to give a flavor, and we'll do a quick Q&A on that. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, you just got sort of capitalised a bit at the end there about the sort of threats. This is really, I suppose, what the globalists want, isn't it? We was chatting with somebody in the coffee break about Asda. They're using facial recognition, and if you haven't created your ID with them, there's barriers that won't open and you can't get in to do your shopping. So they're already starting to use this chimp bit that you described.
Yeah. Exclusion from the troop.
You're excluded from the group, so you're immediately put into that sort of outside situation, and this is what's going to happen if they ever get any further forward with digital IDs. People that won't conform will be excluded from society, and then things are going to be sort of quite difficult. So what would you advise that we do? Because obviously you've got quite a well clued up group here as to what's going on. What pearls of wisdom can you offer us?
Well, there's a mechanistic thing there that they will actively punish non-compliers. That's not so much a chimp thing, but it will cause them to be excluded, which will bring in the chimp. But mainly they'll get compliance by the fear of being potentially seen to be excluded or stopped. Oh my God. People like us, I think in general, and certainly me, don't care a damn about that. You can put 1,000 people and then tell me I'm an anti-vaccine racist or whatever, and I'll smile. And then I'll start arguing with the person saying it. I don't care. But a lot of people are beholden to that. To be honest, there's no magic solution. I think what I was saying earlier, if we create communities, real communities, we get real troops around us. They don't have to fight, chimp troops. And that will build and give us strength. So if we are, put upon or felt to feel excluded there, we know where our real troop is, our real people. And once you've got that, it gives you power. Solzhenitsyn said they developed a quiet power as they came together and recognized that they would rise above it. They had a quiet power. When people were murdered in the middle of the night for a hunk of bread, they had a bunch of them that did not become bestial, and they stayed above it, and it just gave them power. There's an element to that you can achieve by creating communities. Like I got cancelled by 10 or 8 friends
of 40 years. Like 40 years from college, I was cancelled. And they actually knew I was right. But I became embarrassing because many of them were in very senior jobs in banking. And I was becoming, people were saying, hey, your friend Ivor, he's questioning the vaccine. So I was cancelled, but I was fine with that because I was developing new people who had my values. So I'm prepared to let 40 years go. It sounds funny. I'd much prefer to have someone who aligns with my values, someone who would actually do something for you. Because those friends, in retrospect, I look back, of course they do something for you, but if you got in trouble or anything where they felt they didn't really want to be involved, forget it. They never really were true value-sharing friends. Interesting. Sorry.
You're using the chimp analogy a lot, so I'm making the assumption that you think humans came from chimps.
No, I said the creator decided this, or evolution did. I was careful. I just don't get into that discussion. So it's a fact that the architecture of our limbic system is an extraordinary match with the chimpanzee brain. But whether we were created that way or whether Darwin's guff was true, I just don't go there. And in some ways it doesn't matter. All that matters is how the machine works. Yeah.
We should all go to a council meeting eating bananas. Just sit there and eat them while they're talking to explain something.
That's, you know what that triggers? Czech Republic. Remember we showed that great guy? You know what they did during the totalitarian phase? They had a resistance movement. You know, like this, but probably bigger scale and heavier crap going on with the Soviets. You know what they do? If you were caught openly being resistance, you got in trouble. So, you know the electronic component, a resistor? A resistor is a tiny electronic component, very small with little coloured lines on it, showing tens or hundreds, the ohmage, the resistance. Tiny little component with two little wires coming out, and you put it in circuit boards. And what they do is they put this into the wool of their jumper. You'd hardly see it, but if you met someone, you could just glance down and you'd see a resistor and you'd know then. I'm with friends here. Yeah, very subtle. And but that, it just reminded me of that, like, you just, what did you say again? Was bananas? Yeah, you could be like, you know, the banana is the sign. You wave your banana. Don't you wave your banana at me, how dare you. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. Oh yeah.
Yes, what do you think about intuition?
Intuition. I love intuition because I went through that decades ago with my engineering team because I'd read up on it. And I can't remember exactly. Intuition is actually a mixture of pattern recognition, fundamental skill or cognition, prior experience that is in our memory banks in loads of ways, and there was one or two more things, but broadly that magical feeling when you suddenly know what to do. A lot of memories and recognition of patterns at that moment told you, actually, I should pull that lever or whatever. So it's magical, but I think it's kind of scientific too. And a lot of people would say when they have an intuitive moment and a great revelation, they will think of it in a spiritual way. But their brain is so wonderful and complex beyond belief that even if it's the brain doing it, it's still magical and spiritual. That's the way I could look at it. Someone snorting with derision at that last comment. Oh, time up. Last one.
A football analogy, intuition. My hero of all time was Pele. And the 1970 World Cup was probably the best football player. One instance against Uruguay, he's running towards the goal, the bloke kicked the ball over his head. He's running to the goal, goes that way, the goalie gives with him, he lets the ball go that way, he runs round the keeper. He just uses pure intuition.
Instinctive.
Instinctive.
Oh yeah. Oh god, yeah. And I used to do a lot of shooting. And shooting, you do not aim down a shotgun. You just look at the bird and you just put the gun up and just fire you just don't look down it, because your body knows. And look at Tiger Woods, the ball.
Yeah.
How the hell does a human being, that shows you how insane the brain is. A human being hits a tiny little ball, massive force, and comes within inches or even lands in something hundreds of yards away. Now you try and do an AI machine firing balls to do that with no feedback, just trying to let it do the math. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing stuff. Yeah. We got to call it.
Desmond said, I don't know whether that was the first interview with Desmond that I watched.
Oh yeah.
But he said in the beginning that there were about 10-15% of people who could see the bullshit right at the beginning.
Rough and tough, it's broadly agreed, around 10% who are particularly good, and I think there's around 20 more that kind of know but keep their mouth shut.
But then he was saying that to break the psychosis of
The spell, yes.
spell,
You speak. If
there had to be slowly more and more people, and there would be a critical mass. But would he say we're getting near that critical mass?
Yeah, well, he was kind of saying that the people who speak up, so tipping points in human is generally accepted to be 8 to 12% who strongly speak up on something and lobby is a tipping point in a difficult topic where a lot more people will feel safe and say, well, actually, I agree with you. And then it tips over.
Yeah.
He was kind of saying, no, even if 1 or 2% speak up and they can get burnt, they disturb the wave function, they disturb the hypnosis, so they may not be a tipping point, but they'll stop it progressing into chaos and murder. That only a few voices can actually trigger people enough to stop them going all mass formation and basically start, I don't know, guillotines and shit. He didn't talk so much about the tipping point, though I think we did mention it a long time ago. Tipping point is usually 8 to 12% who are standing up and complaining about something which are all meant to shut up about, and then it tips and suddenly everyone's saying it and the bad guys are screwed.
But does that have to be very vocal, or could it be just using cash instead of using the cash? You know, could it be
Using the cash and all that is a means to get towards that. Doing all that stuff is building.
Because I've noticed even if you do that in a shop, sometimes you can get into a conversation.
Or you can resonate with someone.
Because they pick it up and they say, oh, you use cash.
Yeah.
So,
And I always joke.
And then it leads to a conversation.
Exactly. And when I use cash, I always joke with the person in the shop. And I say,
Use it or lose it?
yeah, I'd say, well, as long as I still can use this before they bring in digital and lock us in 15-minute cities, or I make a little joke, and the person often laughs with recognition, and sometimes they just laugh and I'm not sure what I'm saying, but you're absolutely right. But just in the tipping point, the danger we have now, and the important thing is to push back against censorship at all costs. Because if a tipping point is 10%, censorship is how you try and make that tipping point not happen.
Yeah.
Because you just keep it hidden. So if 10 or 12% normally would tip, but basically the system means you can never hear them, it gives us a challenge. So that's why censorship, I mentioned in the first talk, it's a problem. I think we get over it, but we need to find ways of continuing to share, no matter what bullshit censorship they bring in, you know? Yeah, definitely. I think that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.